views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
To Bronx Talk. The Bronx District Attorney is our guest tonight. We're going to talk about the high-profile shootings we've had in the Bronx over the past several weeks and what kinds of things might be done to prevent them in the future. We'll talk about gun control. We'll talk about fighting violence in our streets. Also, a recent newspaper report criticizing conviction rates in the Bronx. We also have the DA's Another Chance program that's coming up in a week, and a variety of other criminal justice issues. We'll get right to it. Please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk the Bronx DA, the Honorable Darcel Clark. Nice to have you.
Hi, Gary. Thank you for having me.
So let's start off with those high-profile shootings. When you sat down, you said, "Boy, we've had a tough time," and everybody in the Bronx and really maybe even all over the country knows that we had 6 people shot at Bronx Lebanon Hospital, and we had a police officer gunned down in cold blood, as horrible as you could imagine. Before I even break them down, what's your perspective? Is this like a trend? Are these events that might be prevented in some form in the future? Just what's your perspective?
It's just unfortunate that the amount of shootings and gun violence we have here in our community and all over the country. You know that gun violence is just prevalent in this country, and we have to do something in order to get the guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them, whether they're simply gang members, young people that are beefing with each other, and more importantly the mental health issues that we face in our communities. And both of the recent shootings that we've had in the Bronx were part of people who had mental health issues. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just so many things intertwined that we just have to do more to get our streets safe and away from violence with guns.
Certainly I would agree, and many would agree, that we need a holistic point of view. I had, over the last 4 weeks, state elected officials on here, and I think I asked each one of them, is there legislation out there that would help? For example, the guy who shot up Bronx Lebanon Hospital, apparently that AR-15 got like a loophole. They reconfigured it so that it could pass through the most recent gun laws. Do we need to go even further? Or are the people who say, you know what, New York has tough gun laws, they have this stuff anyway, gun laws are not the answer?
Well, I think I'm happy that we're in a state that has some of the toughest gun laws in the country, but we have to do more to make sure that those other states, those feeder states, those market states don't keep having such laws that make it easy for other people to go there to order and bring them back to the Bronx. We have to stop those iron pipelines. So we're working hard every day with law enforcement, not only in New York, but throughout the country to try to break down that problem.
I have said this before, that 9/11 in a way galvanized people in the city, and even for me, in a way that I had never thought about our police officers and firefighters in this way. And then it was like, wow, when it comes down, they are our protectors. And how horrible, of course, it was that one of our great police officers was gunned down. Do you have a sense about the relationship between the communities and the police, that as tragic and horrible as they are, people have maybe a better feeling about police officers as a result of that, as a result of being part of the mourning process, that maybe the difficult relationship between communities and police is softening a little?
I think the relationship is getting better because the police are working very hard. They're being trained differently. They're engaging more with the community, and the community wants to engage with them because, after all, people know that they need the police. I don't care what community that you go into, at some point or another they need the police, so they know they do. They just want to know and be confident that the police that they're getting are there, that's going to respect them and keep them safe at the same time. And the police go out there every day, regardless of how the people feel, and go out there and do their jobs every day. So I think it's getting better. It's unfortunate that issues like the killing of Officer Familia gives people pause and they think about it, and you hope that they build on it, but sometimes it's just like, you know, it happens one day and it's gone the next. But I think it's getting better, and people like me, the district attorney, who has to work with both, is always here to try to help engage both sides.
Do you think the notion of police cameras and the use of cameras on their person is an effective tool even for you to find out what really happened? Or there are many people in the criminal justice community think that, you know what, it kind of complicates the problem?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I don't think it can hurt because the truth will speak for itself, hopefully, with video. But at the same time, we've seen plenty of things on video that people have seen it and not believe what they've seen on the video, and it's turned different. But I think at the end of the day, once we really do the research and we really get the kinks out of it and really, you know, work on the challenges of it, I think it'll be a good thing for both the community and the police.
What kind of kinks are you talking about?
Well, not kink, but, you know, like there's going to be challenges as to, you know, the protocols.
When to turn it on.
When to turn it on, when to turn it off. You know, so many different angles. You know, you get one scene where there may be 10 police officers, then you're talking about 10 different cameras, different angles, making sure you get all of that. And then each day, that's hundreds and hundreds of police officers going out, doing their job. You have to store that information. How do you store it? You know, so those are the things that we're working out, logistics. So I won't say kinks, but I'll say logistics. And we're only going to know how to do it as we go along.
But in the long run, I'm just presuming that as a district attorney, the more evidence, the better, because things become clearer. I want to go back to the mental health issue that you brought up. Is there anything out there other than funding and awareness that is needed here? I mean, because you simply, you know, Bronx Lebanon Hospital, to use them as an unfortunate example. Well, and also, I think the shooter of the police officer was at St. Barnabas the night before. They'll say, we just can't hold these people, and we have nothing, you know, we have to release them back in the streets because there's nothing we can do. Is there anything in mental health that could be useful so that, other than, of course, getting guns out of their hands, so that these kinds of events are fewer?
I think that being diagnosed properly and early is one of the things that has to happen. I think that as far as where people live, if they're not going to be in any type of psychiatric facility, if they still need to be in the community, there needs to be supportive housing for people that have to live with mental illness, but to make sure that they have the support that they need in the treatment close to home or at home, which will help alleviate these problems. I know the city has done a big job. The First Lady, Charlene McCray, is doing a tremendous job in putting the information out there so that mental health is not stigmatized the way that it has been. And, you know, I think that you speak in every household, and there's going to be somebody in your family that you know that suffers in one way or another. So it's something that we really need to take head on because it turns into so many things. A behavioral issue that the conduct is because of a psychiatric problem or mental health becomes criminal when not treated properly, and the next thing you know, the default is the criminal justice system.
The other 4 DAs, you think, see eye to eye with you on that or even other issues? Are you?
I can't speak
You know,
for the other
okay.
4 DAs.
We'll have to invite them on here and
Yes,
find that
we put the
ourselves.
other 4 DAs.
Let's talk about the Lincoln Hospital Anti-Violence Initiative. Now, there is, we did, I think, a couple of shows on Jacoby Hospital has their Stand Up to Violence program. I thought when I heard about it, I said, this makes sense. And I'm going to just recap what I know about it, is that if there is a shooting, then not only do they go in and talk to the person even as soon as while they're in the emergency room, but then they will try to trace back who it was and get into the social issues that might be involved, who might have done it, try to prevent a kind of a reaction or a revenge shooting or things like that. And they've had pretty good success. Is that the kind of thing we're going to get in the South Bronx?
Well, they started, I was at the announcement of the Guns Down, Life Up organization that's now out of Lincoln hospitals and some of the other hospitals in the city. And they do just that. They have people there to speak with the victims right away to make sure that they're going to get the resources that they get, those people who have been shot, as well as, you know, try to get the information from the community on how they can make sure that there's no retaliation after the incident has happened. So they've had success in other communities. It deals with young people. It gives them things to do outside of school, after school, you know, just lifestyle choices and training to help them deal with the peer pressure and to get them to not pick up the gun in the first place.
You've been part of, as I understand, a number of anti-violence group meetings and things like that. My sense from all the people I talk to in the Bronx, people in the Bronx are really tired, and they know the problem with guns. They see what's going on with the gangs in their neighborhoods and in public housing and everything else, and frankly, they're fed up. Are these effective? Do you think that there are agenda items that are going to really have effect in lowering crime?
I think they're effective because, you know, we have to try everything. And one of the things with these Cure Violence groups, what they do is they meet the young people where they are, meaning right in the street. This is before they get to me in the criminal justice system. They pick certain areas that they concentrate on. They can't do the whole Bronx. They can't do every neighborhood. It's block by block, street by street, that they concentrate on the young people there and engage them properly. And they're out there with them day and night to make sure when they hear that certain beef is about to happen, they're there to be there to help mediate with them, to get them to make the decision that shooting is not the best way to go. And I think that's important. And then when you speak to, and you should, I'm sure you've spoken to some of the groups, when you talk to them, they have tremendous numbers and success in those catchment areas where they have, you know, 500 days without a shooting there. It's like, well, that sounds great, but I heard there was a shooting like the next block over. Okay, that's not their catchment area, but as long as the area that they're concentrating on, it happens as they move into different areas and communities. We hope to they hope to replicate the same thing. Now, I'm making myself involved because they need to know that I'm part of the process as well. So some of them, you know, they want to be credible messengers, so they don't want to be seen with the police or the DA. But others know how important it is to have the DA as a partner because, you know, they don't want to wait until something happens and, oh, well, can you call the DA because you spoke to her before? No, I want to let them know that I care about them now. I don't want them to get hurt from the beginning. And I want them to make the choice of not to shoot so that they don't have to deal with me.
You know, I remember having sat in this seat for all these years. I remember when your predecessor, Rob Johnson, came up with some of these ideas to say, you know, instead of me just sitting back and dealing with, you know, the criminal cases, I will get involved and put community groups together. So there was kind of this understanding that the DA's office could be more than just a place that obviously goes through cases. On the other hand, the idea of you as the lead prosecutor in the Bronx is, of course, very important. The New York Post came out with a story that said, well, if you're going to commit a crime, do it in the Bronx because you might not get convicted. So let's just go through some of the numbers. They said Bronx prosecutors scored convictions in just 49% of felony trials, far behind the city rate of 67%, and that data was between January 2015 and May 2017. Now, was this part of your jurisdiction here? How do you view what because that's a pretty heavy, direct criticism of your office.
No, I mean, I understand it, but it's a little unfair because some of it happened before it was my office. So, I mean, I've came in, I've made some sweeping changes and concentrated on things that have made it better. So I took office January 16th. So any statistics that they talk about should deal with January 16th on. I mean,
In other words, if I can just interject, so that would suggest that anything between January 2015, if they're using numbers from then, not to say it was good or it was right, and I know you certainly don't want to go back and criticize your predecessor, but you're saying maybe there's a new look at the office and the trends might be different.
No, absolutely, there is. I took over January 2016. Overall, in 2016, our felony trial conviction rate was 54%. The year before that, in 2015, it was 46%. So in just 1 year that I was there, it increased by
8%.
8%. I mean, it's not great, but it's an increase, you know. So that's different.
So if I can just interject as somebody from the media, you could write the story and say that, in fact, Bronx conviction rates are going up, even though they may still be low or lowest in the city, but the trend is up, and I'm guessing that's what your point is.
No, it is. And overall convictions last year, it was up to 52% for overall all convictions, 52%, and it was 47% in 2015. So, you know, we're doing things differently. That's an increase, and it's because I'm paying attention to the work that we're doing. I did a lot of things differently than my predecessor, which I think will attribute to some of the successes that we're having. We have to start off small, start off from the beginning, but we're getting there. I started with the vertical prosecution. That means one assistant DA has a case from beginning to end. That means you have an assistant that knows that case inside and out, the strengths, the challenges. You know when we have a case, whether we should bring charges or not. All of those things come into play into what eventually goes to trial. You know, so things like that. There was a tremendous backlog when I got there. I made everybody accountable. I have something called Trial Stat, where we go over the oldest cases in the county once a week, and we're getting rid of those cases, things that are not viable. We make sure that they go away. If we have to plea bargain, we do so. You know, if we continue to go to trial, we do. But the cases are not old anymore. We're getting rid of that, and the backlog is gone. We cut the misdemeanor backlog by 46% in 1 year.
Another item that they brought up is that city prosecutors declined to bring charges after an arrest in 8% of the cases, but the Bronx DA's office declined to prosecute the most, 15%. Your contention then would be that those numbers were skewed not necessarily from your tenure, but also included things from the past.
Yes, but I mean, let's face it. Remember, the success of a prosecutor is not only convictions. We do so much more as prosecutors. My motto is to pursue justice with integrity, and that means using my discretion sometimes not to charge is part of that make justice for the community. Prevention, we do a lot of crime prevention things, diversion to keep people out of the criminal justice system in the first place. You know, we might have to do a plea offer because it's the best outcome for justice, for the victim, for the defendant. So there's a lot of things that are involved in the work that we do, and it's not just measured by how many cases we take to trial and how many we win and how many we lose.
Across the country, there is a huge problem with opioids. We've always had it in the Bronx. Of course, now, for whatever reason, it's getting much more attention. I thought it was interesting when the Daily News did a series on it, and then they kind of cleared away an area. But of course, you know, the people who were doing drugs went somewhere else. They didn't disappear, and yet that feeds into all the different types of crime that people, of course, become desperate. Of course, people who are using drugs may not be that stable to begin with. How do we deal with that? Are you finding a spike in issues that are related to this crisis? And then ultimately, what's to be done?
Well, I have to tell you, it's just alarming, you know, across the country, the number of opioid cases that there are. There are more deaths attributed to drug overdoses than there are homicides and car accidents.
That's
and the
kind of
Bronx,
unbelievable.
yeah, and the Bronx is right up there throughout the country, not just New York State, but throughout this country. This county has a problem, but we've always had the problem, Gary. You and I know, we both grew up in the Bronx our whole life. Heroin is not new in the Bronx, but it's going into communities where it's never been before, and that's alarming because we don't want it to spread any further than it already has, but it's become a real problem. So now we need to look at those communities where it's always been there and the response hasn't been great, so that we need to do something to treat it there, as well as to make sure we go out into the communities where deaths are happening now to make sure that they don't happen again.
What kind of things need to be done? I think you told me just when you sat down that there's a working group coming up, because this is yet another one of those issues that it's not, you can't just say to the cops, we'll bust everybody and solve the problem. You also can't say to the medical community, somehow figure it out. What has to be done now?
You're right. So we have a working group now. It's something that we're calling Operation HEAT, which is heroin enforcement and access to treatment. And what we're doing is that we're doing this intelligence-based. We're looking at the data. We're seeing those areas where the most deaths are happening, where the most overdoses are happening. Even though people are saved, we're going to those areas because those are the areas where we're probably going to lose more and more people. And we're working.
Excuse me, that sounds like the CompStat program is really what we're talking about on a different level.
Right, it's similar, but we want to go, we don't want to just pick an area, well, let's go over here, and it's not as much of a problem as there is in another place. So we want to go where the problem is most prevalent. And we're putting together a working group with my staff, members of law enforcement and public safety, public health care, health partners, city agencies, everybody, so that we can look at this this problem holistically and see what we can do. So, housing is going to be there, the Office of Mental Health, the hospitals, Montefiore Hospital, NYPD, sanitation, the fire department, all of these agencies and these stakeholders together in these communities to come up with
You're going to need some economic empowerment and educational imperatives so that people have alternatives to the things that they're doing. I want to bring this up, and I know you're enthusiastic about it, and that is, I've got the flyer here. We've got information about it, about this Another Chance. Now, there are hardline people out there who will say, you know what? This is exactly why the New York Post wrote that story. Here's the Bronx DA saying we're going to give people another chance. You know what? The whole idea is we find people who are committing low-level crimes, we stop them from doing those low-level crimes, and then we lower the whole rate of crime down. You have a program now that people can resolve outstanding summons, warrants, they can clear their record. Again, hardliners would say, you know what? We don't want them to clear their record. If they have a record, they should have a record.
Well, first of all, the cases that we're talking about are not the cases that are in the criminal court that are misdemeanors or felony. We're talking about low-level, quality of life crimes that people, rightfully or wrongfully may have been cited for them, but these warrants go, so many years, 10 and 20 years ago. And the reasons why they warrant are because they don't have money, child care, they can't answer them. They're things for like being in the park after dark. Should that be a crime? Is that a crime, being in the park after dark?
Somebody got a summons for that.
They got a summons, right? Or having an open container of beer in the summer. I mean, is that something where people should go to jail? Prior to now, it was. The city council have changed the laws. They've decriminalized them, so now these are only civil penalties. But what remain are about 1.5 million warrants on these.
1.5 million.
1.5 million
in the BX?
In New York City.
Oh, in New York City.
In
Okay.
New York City, of people having these warrants. And what it does, it keeps them from getting a job or going to school. And these are the things that we want people to do so that they are not involved in the criminal justice system. So the hardliners are saying we want them to have a record. That's not helping people because now they can't get a job, they can't go to school,
and then
they don't become a
alone on the
citizen.
system.
Exactly.
Right.
So what I'm doing is, and a lot of these are also, you have to remember, the results of the stop and frisk policies that were prevalent in this city for those 10 and 20 years ago. So, You know, a lot of them are low level. They were because the police were just stopping everybody. And you know, in the Bronx, it was a particular problem because a class action lawsuit came here.
Right.
But remember, Gary, I was a judge here in the Bronx for 16 years before I became DA. I presided over these summonses in the courtrooms, and I could tell you, so many of them were legally insufficient. They weren't even legal.
Verifiable.
Exactly.
So describe to me how it's going to happen. So somebody comes in, and I've got the list of, unlawful possession of marijuana, loitering, noise violation, public urination. I mean, there's a number of them. So somebody comes in and says, well, I've got this outstanding summons. How long ago would it have been? A year, 2 years, 5 years? Could be any?
It could be any amount of time.
And then what happens? They walk into this event, and what
They
happens?
walk into this event, they'll see a lawyer. There'll be a lawyer there. The court is there. The lawyer will go before a judge who is going to be there. Court officers are there. My office will be there.
And what are they going to do?
They're going to ask
write
that
it off? And by the way, we put the information on the screen, so as people are listening to this, you can jot it down. And if you do have this kind of outstanding summons, this is really the time to deal with it. Go ahead.
So they will come in and they'll have it taken care of. The warrant will be vacated, so they don't have to worry about the police going out and pulling them in. They're in jail 2 and 3 days waiting to see a judge for a case where they were in the park after dark. You know, so they go to see the judge will hear it, the warrant will be vacated, so there's no longer a warrant, and then the court, along with the attorney, the judge, and the DA will take care of the case, and by the time it's over, it's done, and the case is resolved.
A whole section of our population is being driven underground because they may be undocumented, and somebody who's undocumented and is concerned about this outstanding warrant would say, you know what? I don't want to do this because if I get in there and they get my name, the next thing I know I will be deported. Should people who are undocumented be concerned about showing up at this event?
What they should do is call the number on the flyer or call the Bronx Defenders. The Bronx Defenders is the legal advisors for the defendants, and they should speak with Bronx Defenders on how to handle that particular situation before they come in. Yes.
You mentioned that over 1 million summonses. You have a sense of how many are in the Bronx?
I think
I guess you're about to find out.
No, we are. I think that the last time there was a run, we did this maybe a couple of months ago. I think in the Bronx, there's somewhere around 325,000.
It's just an unbelievable number. So if we can put that information back up on the screen, then maybe we can get some of those taken care of. And it's part of peace of mind. It also may get in the way of somebody, as you say, advancing in their lives. Before we let you go, Madam DA, just curious, as we sat here and talking, I watched you get more and more passionate about what it is that you do. Are you hopeful? Are you hopeless? I mean, your job is to be right in the middle of some of the most difficult things in the Bronx. What's your kind of personal feeling when you walk in every day? Is it a difficult job? Is it hopeful? Are you hopeless? Just give me your perspective.
It's not difficult, and I always have hope. I mean, I love this county. I wouldn't have taken this job if I didn't care about the county and the people that live in it. I want this to be a safe community for everybody that lives here. And it's my job to make sure that I work hard each and every day to work with those who can help me make the county safe.
They're waving at me that I got to cut you off, even though that was the best statement of the day. DA Darcel Clark, we really would love to have you back.
Right,
and I'd love to have you back with the announcement that crime has been driven down. We've gotten drug off the streets. We've rehabilitated people. I think we'd all agree with that.
I'm hopeful with that, too.
All right, and if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, you send us an email. It's bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You can send us a tweet at BronxTalk. Put it on our Facebook page. We'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Our archives, you can watch all the old shows at bronxnet.org. BronxTalk is on the lower right navigation bar. Thanks to Lindsay, the producer, Brianna, the director, the cast of thousands. Good night.